Is the little timer thing going? Okay, perfect. Okay. So thank you everyone for coming. This is the North Kingstown DEI Subcommittee meeting for October 18th. I will call this meeting to order. My name is Erin Earle, and I am sitting in as the chair of the committee today, as Ms. Lima had a prior engagement and wasn't able to attend. And so I will do my best to fill her big shoes. The first thing that we'll do is a roll call, and so if everybody doesn't mind going around and just saying their name so that we have attendance, that would be great.
Starting here, I'm Sherry Gagnon.
Melissa Campbell-Calcite.
Dave Alden.
Katie Gabriel Black.
Chloe Diehouse.
Great.
Shivani Finkelstein.
Rob Bezanon.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you all so much. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 20th meeting minutes. Those were shared with you via the email that Jen sent out. And so do we have a motion to approve those minutes? Okay, so we'll do Dave. I forgot, I have to write notes. I can do this. Okay, and then do we have a second? We'll do Melissa. Any discussion regarding the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Is that everybody? I'm going to abstain as well.
I'll abstain.
Okay, so we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ayes and 2 abstentions because Roe and I were not able to attend. Okay. Which, fun fact, Robert's rules, you technically can vote on them, but I always think that's weird. But you couldn't. Interesting, right?
Good to know.
Yeah, it's a thing. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to give an update on the recommendations to the school committee regarding the subcommittee membership. So first, thank you all so much for the hard work that you did on that. I did watch the tape of the meeting that you all had in September. I know, wild, right? I wasn't in it, so I was able to watch it. I thought you all had a really thoughtful conversation, and we've had a couple. And so the next step after that was Jen forwarded it to the school committee, who did receive it and look at it, not at the meeting last night, but the one prior to it. And so what we did, and Jen knew that this was going to be the process, is that we made an official recommendation that it go to the policy subcommittee. And so the school committee has a variety of different committees, and one of them is the policy subcommittee. And the reason that we made the recommendation for it to go from you all to the school committee to the policy committee is because our goal is to have, as Jen's mentioned, that kind of general overview kind of policy that dictates and kind of guides the school committee on how our subcommittees function, and then have the individual application processes. And so, unfortunately, at our last policy subcommittee meeting, which was Monday? What is time? This week is a lot. Which was on Monday, we had a pretty hefty agenda, and we unfortunately did not get to that item. But we meet often. We meet every other week intentionally because we're trying to update and catch up on our policies. And so we are going to prioritize it next time because we know, particularly for this subcommittee, like we want to be able to move forward in this school year with kind of turning over some membership, because we know a lot of you have served for a bit and we're so grateful for that. And then also making sure that we have a clear and transparent process for how people can get on the committee, because we also know that there's community members in the world. So even though that seems like a long process, our goal is to be able to look at it at our next policy subcommittee meeting, hopefully make a recommendation to the school committee to adopt as a policy for generalness, and then it will come back to you all with kind of like some direction on steps forward on how to have people apply and kind of roll the committee, if that makes sense. And so that is where we're at. Realistic timeline, I think, for all of that, just kind of based on the meetings. I would be extremely ecstatic if we could have something for the new calendar year, like January 2024, as far as like having applications up for the subcommittees. I think just based on the different times the school committees have and the fact that a new policy has to have 2 reads, like with the marching out the committees, like that will be probably effective. And then also it kind of makes sense for like when like schools kind of have 2 times, in my opinion, in like for open enrollment, if you will, and it's kind of like that before we kind of come back after winter break and before we come back after summer break. And so I think as far as the community and paying attention to things school related, it could work. So that is my goal. for that, and I know that's a little bit longer, so of course, if anyone has concerns about their membership on the subcommittee in that interim, and because it's 2 more months in theory, definitely talk to Jen about it, because we of course want our community members to not feel like they're miserable if they're coming to a meeting, so.
Erin, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
So, sorry for clarification.
Yeah.
So, policy met this past Monday.
Yeah,
So, meet again in 2 Mondays.
no, it will
No.
meet again, yes, so we'll meet again,
Sorry, I don't even
It's
know the
okay.
calendar.
so policy will meet on October 30th.
Okay, and then if what we had said was approved or
Yeah.
tweaked, whatever, then that goes to school committee.
Yeah,
So potentially
that
that
will,
same week or the week after?
it will be December. Hold on. November 16th would
So-
probably be first read,
Got it.
and then November, the holidays are, December 5th would be the second read.
Okay.
Then the month advertising, if that was adopted, like, it
Right.
would be about a month, and so that's what I'm thinking, like, early January,
Got it.
applications due and whatnot for kind of when we come back to school.
Okay, I was just, the
Yeah.
timeline I wanted to look
Yeah,
at.
it's a really good, it's a good question, and it's also really complicated because
Yeah.
you do need to do 2, for whenever the school committee sees a new policy, we need to see it twice, and so that's a month every time. And then also the way you put things on a school committee agenda, like you have to have that a week in advance. So it's this wild puzzle of, productivity and efficiency. But that's why I wanted to give a realistic timeline, so
Yeah.
that if anybody does need to have a conversation with Jen, that you all could do that, and that's okay. And so, any other questions regarding kind of the process, or anything like that?
There just likely won't be anything on it next month at this meeting.
So
Because
the
of
next
way that it
meeting
falls,
for
The
this,
15th, I believe, so you said.
yep, so this
hopefully
is,
16th.
yeah, so the only thing that we might have as far as that is perhaps an update from the policy, like kind of that policy committee. Also, there may be a need for a special meeting of the school committee, based on a couple of timely things that we need to get done for the state, et cetera, that we weren't able to wrap up. So there may be an interim meeting that we might be able to time correctly. So yeah, we likely won't have like a solid update until that December kind of timeframe. Yeah, no worries. And again, we appreciate your work, and I know that that sounds silly, but it is what it is. Yay. Okay, any other questions regarding that? Okay, awesome. And again, apologies, my phone is my computer right now, so bear with me. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to review and discuss the equity audit, and discuss ways to develop a criteria for prioritization for implementation of additional recommendations with possible actions for the school committee. And so when I talked to Jen today about kind of, hey, what would be success at the end of the meeting, she was hoping that this group could really work through and have, like, kind of identified those top 5 things that you kind of want to move forward to the school committee, as far as prioritizations, et cetera. And I think that, so we can kind of work through whatever makes sense for you all as far as that piece of it. But then also, I think with that concept, it's also a very great time because for those of you who might not be aware, we're starting the conversations about budget process and budget cycle for the next fiscal year, which will start in July. And so that's great because, like, if you're setting recommendations now, that allows the administration and the school committee to be aware of some things that we might want to consider in the budget cycle. So I think as far as where you all are for that piece of it, obviously you had your initial recommendations, but then now, like, this is a good timing for kind of where you might want to go next. And so I'm going to try to mess around with my computer a bit, or no, we're not going to be able to do that. That's hard, right?
I can get this.
Yeah. Did you get the document?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe that would be helpful. And so does anybody have any recommendations on kind of where you want to start in this conversation? Obviously, you've gone through the process where you did the rankings and different things like that, and kind of worked through that. And so any thoughts on what would be the easiest or best place to talk? Does anybody have a sense of kind of where maybe you were hearing maybe some consensus or some like strong support for something that you think we should maybe start with an easy one, for a lack of a better word, or anything like that. So take a second, open up the doc, I'll put with the internet, Rob will
Yep. I'll get
work
this.
on that. We'll ground ourselves.
It was in the email we had.
Yep, I can look and see. Happy to forward it to people too once I.
This is linked to Jen's email, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the camera's on your email right now, so.
No.
Okay. Like, go fast.
I'm going, wait, what the heck?
Now you're in Peru. I don't think you're in Gmail, I think you're in. Oh, you're in yeah, no, you should be fine.
Not close our eyes.
You're right.
I know, right? No, that's not right.
It was sent October 15th.
There it is.
Thank you. While we're pulling that up, just a quick update on a previous recommendation. If you haven't seen it yet, there is a job posting that's up for the DEI Wellness Title IX hybrid that reports to HR. And so that is up on School Spring.
Yep.
Is that the correct?
Mhm.
Is that the DEI position?
Yeah.
DEI Wellness, yeah.
It's on School Spring, yeah.
School Spring, yeah, so that is available, and so, we are, Dr. Duba actually is gonna be working on a correspondence about all positions that are available in the district, so that we can get the word out to folks, and so that one will likely be included in that, and so if you look at the job description and then have thoughts or ideas on people applying, definitely encourage them to do so. Cause it is definitely a niche position, but also a very cool opportunity. Okay, so this is the document again that we had worked through, and people had done rankings, et cetera. We had obviously originally came up with the rubric, and then we had come up with kind of the possible different areas and recommendations. And I don't know if you can sort by, what is
We have
Jen?
the top 5 here.
Yeah,
That's what we kind of came, that was.
okay, so this is kind of where we're at, correct?
Yep.
And again,
This is-
apologies, I was at a conference last meeting, so I'm
That's
playing
all right.
catch up and post at the same time.
So we had,
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
yeah, sorry.
No, please do.
I remember having this meeting last spring when we discussed the priorities. That was over at the high school. And I remember we had a long and I thought very productive discussion about how we would kind of identify the priorities, the categories we look at, the criteria. We looked at things like, I know we looked at like impact on students. We looked at things, the resources, I believe, if I remember correctly, had to do with just like resource efficiency and the ability to like actually bring things to the realization based on the resources at our disposal. And then we also looked at, let me look at this definitions criteria, impact on disparities. Yep, will this specifically impact areas where gaps in subgroups have been identified? We talked about impact on culture, how far-reaching in the district community will the impact be? Does it include teachers? Ease of implementation, we talked about effect on other systems. Does implementing this mean other things need to change, or does this have a ripple effect on other areas? So I remember it was a really good discussion. We went through a number of things and basically tried to define that criteria, and then from there we went to, all right, how, based on the criteria, what do we think, is the most impactful? And we came up, this was like a summary of the top 5 total in terms of the points we awarded, right? So we talked about increasing opportunities for student voice in areas valued by students. We talked, create an NKSD equity vision statement and engage stakeholders in creating it and then publicize it throughout the district. Regularly monitoring discipline data, creating an equity communication plan to develop key messages to share the vision for equity both internally and externally, and then solicit student input about the current disciplinary system. So I thought these were all high leverage priorities, personally, because you're talking about communication, you're talking about, vision, and kind of bringing together a shared understanding of like what we're talking about when we talk about equity. And we're also talking about like tangible goals, right, with the discipline data, because we're looking at things that are like tangible, impactful on students, impactful on culture. So those are things that are really like, to me, like wins if we can get there. And then we also looked at, we also identified the bottom 5. One of the things I want to talk about with this though is, we did set aside money within our Title II grant this year. And one of the things I'd like to do, that we put on hold for now, but I'd like to get to, is going to be putting a bid out, an RFP for a consultant to come in, a consulting group to come in and kind of do a, oversee like a professional development program with teachers around a lot of these. And also, and really in the bid that we put out there, we identified these as being really like the focuses of the work we want to do. So professional development is like targeted, and it's not just like
One-offs.
yeah, exactly. It's not just some drive-by thing. Like we want it to be like targeted to the goals we've identified, and something that teachers can really grab onto and kind of apply in their practice. So anyway, so we're looking forward to that. I think that'll be. I participated in some of that work personally in my former district, and I thought it really made a big difference. So we're looking forward to that.
So I think also, thank you so much for that synopsis, I really appreciate it. So also when you look at this document, and again, like I think it's good to look at it in this way because like top 5 total is like those combined scores of what you all ranked it at. But then if you look at like top 5 impact, there's some difference, right? And so Jen did a nice job color coding it. So like you can see like the yellow one on the top is in all 3, right? So top 5 score, top 5, like whatever, right? And then, but then like you see some other ones that just fall like in the impact one, but maybe didn't get all the way to the total one, or like maybe some that are, so like in my mind, like there's probably 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe like 8 or 9 up there that kind of ranked high in different varieties of the categories. And again, the one thing I want to acknowledge is this is a very like formulaic way to look at this very emotional document, right? And so I think that that's just something to acknowledge as far as like these were student stories and faculty and staff stories that they were so willing to share with us. And so I always try to like remember that and go back to the actual document itself when I am thinking about like these things, because like it's so important to look at it like this so that we can figure out priorities. But every single thing on that list is not like something we don't need to do. Like it's just what order do we do it in? What are the biggest things? What are going to make the most impact? And so I just want people to think about that, because even if it was ranked, in that bottom 5, that doesn't mean that this district shouldn't do it and won't do it. It's just us trying to sort through the plethora of information that we got from the professionals that came in to be able to say, okay, we did a couple things, like when we first got the report, what are we going to do this fiscal year, what are we going to do next fiscal year, so on and so forth. So I just want to put that in context as we kind of talk through it, and also really echo what Rob said about the concept of like tangible goals. I think it's so important, especially when we're doing work like this, to have like quick wins, for lack of a better word, and also long goals and like vision, right? And so like I think thinking about that too, of like, okay, where are students actually going to see this impact? Where are staff going to really see this very kind of soonish, because like they're going to be like they graduate, right? And so we want to make sure that the students who told us the things get some benefit from the work that we're doing. So I always try to keep that in mind too, that it can't all be 5-10 year things. Like trying to find some opportunities for some quick work is just as important. So can you go scroll back over to the left?
If I could, if you don't mind, Erin,
Yeah,
just
please.
one other thing to add to that is I think it's important that we understand and acknowledge the fact that this work never ends.
Yep.
You know what I mean? This work never ends. We never reach a point where we like check the box and we move on and we say, we're good, you know? It's always gonna be, we are always gonna be ever evolving and ever shifting and ever like, you know, strategizing in different ways and all those things. That's important. I think that's why to kind of echo Erin's point there, you have your tangible items, which I think are very important, because to me it's like when you can zero in on issues that really people can really identify and own, mostly our students and our staff. But when you could also kind of like couple that with our grander vision, right? Our bigger picture vision, our bigger goals that we have, where we are now versus where we want to be. I think those two things really work hand in hand together. You know, so that's the hope, I think.
Any thoughts from the committee on kind of like, before we kind of start like trying to piecemeal like what we think might be the top 5? And 5 I think is a good number. You know, I think less might be too like low, and 5, but like 7 might be too ambitious. So I do think 5 for like a fiscal year is actually a lot of things. So, you know, but like if we had 4 or we had 6, like I don't think we have to like it's, I don't think there's a perfect number. So any thoughts from you all on as we approach this stuff?
I think the creating of the equity vision statement is probably top order, I would imagine. And other things fall underneath that, I think.
Yeah, so kind of taking that approach of prioritizing that and maybe sending that forward is, it might be hard to do some of the other work or set the tone for some of the other work if we don't have that vision from the district. So maybe prioritizing that because it's such a big overarching one. Is that kind of what you were?
Exactly.
Yeah. What's the committee's thoughts on that?
I can't help but, sorry to jump in, I can't help but think when I see that is the work of the vision of the graduate that we're gonna be doing. Because that's like, to me, these go hand in
Yeah,
hand.
circles, yeah.
So the fact that we're gonna be doing that work, the fact that we've already started with the process of identifying, putting together a design team for that.
Do you want to quickly just make sure, I don't know if everybody watches every
Yeah.
meeting and everything we do and every
Yep.
email we send, but just like a quick synopsis
So,
for the people
yeah,
just to
thank you.
understand.
So,
No worries.
We do.
I know you know
Yeah.
deep down in your heart because you breathe and dream about it, but.
We're going to be working on a vision of a graduate, defining our vision of a graduate for the district. The impetus for this is the fact that it's a part of our high school accreditation process, and we're up for that cycle in a couple of years. But it really is more than the high school. It's very much a district-wide exercise. And so what it is basically is you're looking at identifying what are your core skills, knowledge, qualities that every graduate needs to make sure they demonstrate before they earn a North Kingstown High School diploma. And it's really about like crafting a vision around that, identifying those skills, defining those skills, and then from there looking at, okay, where are we with these skills? You know, what strengths do we have? Where are we maybe a little needy? And then from there it's, okay, how are we like sort of like backwards designing the progression models for these skills? So how are these kids getting exposure in the early grades, in the later elementary grades, in the middle grades, in the high school grades, different benchmarks along the way. And then we look at our assessment systems, and we look at our performance-based assessment systems, or our local ones, ways that students like can authentically display what they know. And then how is that in alignment with our vision? So it's a very comprehensive process. And to me, equity vision is going to be absolutely like baked right into that process, you know? So I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so for me, like with what you just said too, like the equity vision statement might help the work of the vision of the, like if we had a statement, like do you see them as, like that one would come first still, or where do you see it in the
I don't know.
order of operations? They're all intertwined.
I think it's gonna have to be like the work of the group
Yeah.
to sort of like vet out how that works. I just know that it's gonna be an essential part You know what I mean? And whether it's decided that this kind of like maybe lives a little bit as an offshoot of the
Yeah.
process, or this is baked in, I think that's really a group thing. But we have a very experienced coordinator, consultant, if you will, who's gonna be walking us through this, and I know that they have a lot of experience doing this kind of work, and we've also, Shivali and I have also done some pre-work with her, just to kind of give her the context of what our district is working on, and this group was very much, you know, part of that conversation around the goals that we have. And we shared some stuff that we've been working on with her.
That's great. So with that kind of said, as far as, unless I just text you, can you check the recording? I'm paranoid. Just go look and make sure the little county thing is counting. I was like, I'm so scared of Jen. No.
Did she just text you?
No, she's.
Doesn't record.
Little county thing is counting.
Okay, perfect.
That is the
Just
technical.
want to make sure. Thank you. I had no doubt, but also much doubt. So thoughts on, out of all the different things, there was what, how many, can you go back to the main page? There's like 50, right, or something, recommendations?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's,
Yeah, 38. Okay, so out of the 38 recommendations, you had sent forward a couple before. And so what are folks' thoughts? Dave had made a suggestion that one of the things that you send to the next school committee meeting from the DEI subcommittee is, hey, we really think that the district needs to put some time and energy and resources into creating an equity vision statement. What does the committee think about that? Pros, cons? And just so you know, I know I don't run this meeting often or ever, but I'm big on like conflicting visions doesn't mean like that's good for conversation, right? And it doesn't mean that we don't love Dave or don't love the idea or don't whatever, but like I like counter perspectives just because then it helps us think through something. So please know that like we can work through that together and it's okay.
Is it our responsibility to create this vision statement, or are we tossing the ball to the school committee
It's a great question.
to do it? I thought we had started this a while ago too.
I think we tried to make one.
I think we, yeah, I do
It's
too,
a
I think
draft.
there was
Yeah.
some work on it.
Yeah. It's not the next agenda item, is it? Yeah, so I think for in my opinion, a district-wide a equity like vision would most certainly work with this group, right? But I think it's broader than that, right? It's getting input from the administration, it's getting input from the building leaders, it's getting input from more students, it's getting, so I think you need someone to kind of lead a charge, and kind of do it in that sense, but I don't know if it would be 100% on this committee. Like I would feel like if the school committee said, yes, we think that's a good idea, we would like the district to come up with this by the end of the school year or by whatever date, then the conversation would be with the superintendent and whatnot about kind of who would start that process, but I do think that no matter what we did, like this group's voice would be important in it. So I don't know 100% of like what that would mean. The school committee would probably make that decision. There could be a possibility where they would toss it back to you all and say, hey, come up with a draft. But being that I'm in both roles, like I don't think that would happen, if that helps.
and this is just my experience, but what I found is that it's very hard to craft a vision statement. It's very hard, especially if you haven't had like experience. I have some experience with crafting vision statements. I've never had experience with crafting equity vision statements. Doesn't mean we can't do it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be very closely involved. But I would wanna, like, if we were to do it, my first step would be like, how can we reach out to districts, to people in certain positions who've done this work before, see some samples that are out there, talk about process, talk about, how to get buy-in, talk about how to engage stakeholders, get feedback, all those things, from somebody who has done it before.
I
You know?
think we did that, we've
Yeah.
done some of that.
Oh, we have?
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
did a
Yeah.
vision statement
Yeah.
search in my Gmail, and Jen started a document that has a lot of
Okay.
different districts pulled,
Yeah.
like all in one documents.
Yeah.
I mean, before
I think
Got it.
before.
Yeah.
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 Okay, all right, all right.
Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
it was a while.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That makes me feel better.
so I think, as far as,
Yeah.
so in theory, the subcommittee could write a draft vision statement and send it up to the school committee, right? But also knowing that like, as the chair of the school committee, like I would probably say like, that's great start, but like, I'd also like to get input from the following like groups. So if you all wanted, you could send a recommendation that this should happen, and you could send a recommendation that the DEI subcommittee create the first draft, if that's the vision that you see. Or you could just send the recommendation up and let the school committee decide kind of the process with the administration after that point. So I think there's two paths, like, on how you could recommend it. I don't think either's bad, but I do think it is not as simple as, like, you, to get full buy-in, like, even if we could write the best one ever, like, it won't be effective or efficient, because part of the process of creating it is the process of educating the community about what we value and hearing what we value, you know, like, that process is part of the learning, I think. And so, even though it would be easier just to be like, this is a really good vision, like, I think, like, it would be a little bit more complex than it probably should be, but, like, it will be good long-term. So.
But even like you said, like with that, the vision of the graduate, like so much of it, like, is gonna filter into other places.
Yep.
They're different in my mind though, like, the vision of a graduate is very student specific, where, like, you know,
Very
like,
different,
and
Oh, yeah,
I think
but
it
I
will have
mean-
an equity lens through it, but, like,
Correct.
yeah. Other thoughts?
This equity person, this job application deadline is October 25th, so this person could be involved in the process pretty soon.
If there are,
If we get a
if
person,
we are
yeah.
successful in that first round, yeah. Again, it's a pretty niche position, so I feel like it will be a bit of a search. Like, I'm optimistic that we might find someone, but I don't think it's gonna be, because there's not a lot of districts in Rhode Island that have similar positions. Like, I could imagine that it will be maybe extended then from that.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm wondering. I don't know if this will make any sense to anyone else, but I really agree with what Mr. Alvin said about like I think that it is really important to create the vision statement, because I think that could like we have this list of like 45 items, and creating a statement that kind of encapsulates our goals for equity like could help us, like we could refer to that when figuring out how to take on all the other items. But my question is, I know you mentioned that it could be, a lengthy process. I'm worried, like, would we be waiting on the finalization of the vision statement to take on other items on the list, and would that possibly slow down the other items because it's a lengthy process? Does that make any sense at all?
Yep, it
That's my only
absolutely is.
concern, you know what I mean? Like, if we're gonna use it as a basis for other things, but then it takes a long time to get done, will that delay our ability to do those other things?
Yeah, I think it's a valid question. My philosophy is you take multiple paths in at one time.
Okay.
Like, I think in education, if you waited for things to get done in a sequential order, it would be decades sometimes. And so I think what I meant when I was saying, like, that the vision statement might make sense to be one of the first things that we try to tackle, wasn't saying that it would be the first thing, I think, so if I was not clear on that, sorry. And, but also, I do think that you could work on some of these other things while also doing a vision statement, because, like, we're working on things right now when we don't even have a vision statement, right? So, like, I think that that's important, and if that's important to you all, like, making sure to make that clear to the school committee, like, in your recommendation, that, like, alongside, while other work is happening, like, also be
Right.
working on this.
I just
kind of-
wanted to make sure the
yeah.
vision statement wasn't like the basis for all the other work.
Yeah,
in
it's a good
which
point.
case It could lengthen the process, that's all.
Yeah, super valid. Other thoughts, Molly?
I think the school committee
Yeah.
would have greater access to assemble a diverse group. I mean, we're somewhat of a diverse group, we're on the DEI committee, but the school committee would have more access to more students, more families, to create a more diverse group, which could develop that statement. So having it, I think maybe recommending to the school committee that they assemble like a bat signal or something, send out a call to have people that might want to work on that. And that will also increase opportunities for student voice, because you could have a set number of students that you might want on there, or that volunteer. And as Chloe, as Mr. Mezzanotte said, they're already pushing out for the professional development stuff as well. So that's going forward while this is happening, and there's a few different paths going at all at the same time.
Yeah, because at the high school level, we could have, in addition to however you collect feedback, we could have focus groups that are defined by the school committee of how they want the makeup to look like for those focus groups, and we could facilitate that in the buildings as administrators and bring information back.
Yeah, so I think, so as far as, can you go back to the top 5 part? So, any other thoughts or conversation right now about the equity vision statement? Like I think we should talk through, I don't think, we don't need to come to consensus on every item and everything, but so I think we've talked about that one for a good amount of time, unless others have things that you wanna talk about on this one. Sure. And we can come back to it, but just I just wanna make sure we think about maybe some of the other ones. So what are some other ones that the committee sees that stands out to them? That if the school committee and the school district didn't do this year, as a member of the DEI subcommittee, you would be sad. That's how I would look at it.
So one that stands out to me is review and revise discipline policies and practices from an equity lens. Because I think that there's a pervasive trend when it comes to school discipline, and North Kingstown is no different than really pretty much any American school, having to do with discipline and equity, and it's a problem. And so to me that's just my perspective. I think that's really a goal worth.
Something that should be in the top 5?
I think so.
Yeah. Others thoughts on that one? So you can see that on line 4 under the top 5 total. It also hits on impact as something that might be highly impactful for students. Thoughts on that one? Yeah, cool.
I just want to say I agree totally. I think that there's been progress made in terms of equity in discipline practices, especially with the changes to the dress code, which I think as a young woman in the school district is something I really noticed, but there's still a lot of progress that can be made, and so I really agree with what you said. I just wanted to
Thank
say.
you, yeah.
Others thoughts?
I fully agree as well. I think this comes more from a professional development and trainings for teachers and staff and students and everybody, because it's so subconscious. What was it called, the implicit bias, which causes these discrepancies in the things that we're seeing, that everyone sees, but we're definitely seeing it here too. And it's that implicit bias that we need to train people on and fix that. So I think it is gonna come from PD. It's not, we can keep looking at the numbers, and I think we'll just keep seeing the same thing until it is consciously addressed.
Others thoughts on this one is perhaps a priority, or thoughts kind of there within it?
Well, I think I agree with you, Dave, but I think there's 2 parts to it. There are some practices in the building that can be changed. For instance, out of school suspension versus in school, right? That's one thing we've already changed, and we already know the data, so we've already kind of made some of those changes. So I think there are things you can do right now, and then there are other things that can come as a part of professional development. So I think we could still tackle that in.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you. I think it's definitely looking at policies, right, and seeing is there anything in the way that policies are written or what we're saying that might be having a disproportionate effect on students. So a great example was the one that Chloe did about a dress code, right? That is a really tangible example of one that might be being imposed on a certain population of students versus others. And so that's definitely a piece of it. It's the policy piece, and the policy piece, of course, lives with the school committee and the policy subcommittee, which is a tangible, somebody that can work on that. And then the practice lens, if the district was to prioritize this, I think that goes back to what Shivali was saying about having the building administrators, having the central admin think about, okay, what are our current practices, and are there things that we could do or change that could positively impact it? And those might not be things that are dictated by the policies. Those are just practices that are, either in the student handbook or whatnot that are different in that range. And then I think your point, Dave, about the professional development to help support that is really important, because you can have practices and you can have policies, but if you have staff that don't understand at a conscious level what they are doing to students that might be different than other students, then like all the other work isn't going to stick, because like the interpersonal interactions are a key part of like how students go through the discipline process. And so I think it's anything that you work on in this area, you can't just do one lens on it, like it has to be multiple. And so I think, if we were gonna look at this, it would be a multi-tiered approach. That might take resources or might take time, and so I think, if that's a priority, then we would have to go in multiple ways. Others thoughts?
One of the things that I think about too when it comes to discipline policies and practices is, what's the status at our building levels of our PBIS programs? Because
So civilians don't know what that is.
sorry. Positive behavioral interventions and supports.
Thank you.
So the idea there is that rather than like just looking at punishing bad behavior, we're kind of flipping that in reverse, and we're talking about acknowledging and rewarding the values and the behaviors that we're seeing from kids that are contributing in a positive way. I've seen it. I've seen that have a really significant impact on schools, because it flips the conversation. It flips the conversation away from, well, when they do this, what are we gonna do? It flips that around and say, no, how are we going to create an environment that is a place where everybody feels that they belong and welcome? You know what I mean? And if that's not happening, if they're not feeling belonged and welcome, how are we going to adjust accordingly, right? So I think it approaches the conversation in a much better way. It approaches it more from a positive direction than a negative direction. So I'd be just curious as to where we are at the building level, especially at the middle and high schools, around these kind of activities, because schools that have this as a foundational thing, there's frequent activities, there's systems in place, there's consistency with how we acknowledge and reward that type of behavior.
Would that be like with the recommendation, the report about like using restorative discipline practices, is that the same?
A little different, a
Yeah.
little similar, yep.
Friends,
Yep.
right? Like,
Similar, yep, cousins kinda, you know what I mean? Yeah. There's restorative practices are very good practices. That's really, again, that environment. I heard some teachers at Davisville talking about practices that they do with that, where it's a lot of it's that personalization work and advisory, where they do practices that are, again, like intentional, right? To kids feeling included, kids feeling accepted, connected, and all those things. PBIS is very similar to that, not exactly the same, but I think the same goals.
other thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So again, we're talking about the recommendation to not only regularly monitor discipline data, but also there's some like other ones that go along with that, about reviewing and revising discipline policies and practices from an equity lens. So there you can see like there's a couple that kind of like are friends, like line 4 and then line 5 under C, that are in my mind kind of a little connected.
Line
So
6 too,
yeah.
the solicit student input.
Yeah, so like in your top 5, like that definitely seems to be a thing that you all were picking up in a multitude of ways based on the recommendations. What are other thoughts on kind of maybe prioritizing this, or, things that you all, again, like, in June, like when, like what is success? Like what would we hope that our district is able to move forward, et cetera? Any thoughts? Yeah.
Well, I know Mr. Alvin briefly mentioned student voice, but I can see it's number 1 on all 3, so evidently we already are excited about it, but I thought I'd emphasize that I'm really in favor of increasing opportunities for student voice in areas valued by students, especially on like committees like these, like having a student representative. I mean, I know it's been really valuable for me, and in my time at NKHS, I've very often have students that I know or don't know even come up to me and who know I'm on this committee and ask me like, how can I get on it? And you know, obviously at that time, like, you know, we're only now reopening applications, but I think that having more opportunities like this, because in my opinion at least, I don't, you know, there's really no such thing as too much student input in a lot of situations. And so I think that the students really want to be in leadership positions, I don't know leadership positions, but like positions like this, and have their voices heard, not just, you know, from the podium, but at the table, you know what I mean? And so I think that I'm a senior now, and I'd like to see by the end of this year, for the students in my class, but then also in the classes below me, have more opportunities to like be sitting at the table. You know what I mean?
Other thoughts?
This is a leadership position, Chloe, and from 3 faculty and staff, I think I can speak for us and say we hope that this is in your personal statement, your resume, and everything as you're applying to college. So there's that. So yes, like noticing it's in all 3 columns over there highlighted, and I think like my question is very simple of like, is this even brought up at any meeting that's around this table or any other committee where something comes up and are the folks around the table asking, what do our students say about this? Like, is that simple question just vocalized in a meeting? And I think like, you know, when we were talking about the vision statement and everything, like that's where my head went, and how do we capture students' voices quickly, easily? I don't know, but even if there was like a, I don't know, in the cafeteria or something, and a big sign of when you think of equity, what do you see in the future? And write 1 or 2 words on a scrap paper and drop it in a bucket kind of thing, but we're capturing potential language that can be incorporated into a statement directly from our students, like little things like that. I'm just like, do we even ask that question? What do other students think whenever something comes up at a meeting?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, and also thinking about like, if not, how do you instill that in a culture, right? And how do you instill that is something that every person, whether they're on the school committee, whether they're in the administration, whether they're a building leader, whether anybody that's working on making decisions for students, like how are we creating a culture that's in their mind frame? I have been impressed from the amount of time, almost a year now actually, of the conversations that the district does have. I do think the district as a whole has a student-centered approach, which is good. You would want that in a district, right? And so, but always there's room for improvement. And then I also think it's taking it one step deeper of which students have voice and who aren't we hearing from when we're making decisions too. So I think it can be a little even deeper too. Just a reminder about some of the data that's in the equity audit regarding this one. When thinking about like tangible success. So like students have limited voice in decision making was one of their findings, right? And they went on to say that only 64% of students that participated in the equity audit responded strongly agree that at every school they have an opportunity to share their ideas and improve their learning experience. And while 64% is more than half, like that number in my opinion is not like good enough, because that means that you know, about 30% of students feel like that's not that. And so success to me is like looking at tangible things that we could do as a district, so that if we ask that question again, like the percentage of students, like respondents, you get to 75%, you get to 80%, you get to 90%, you know, like you get closer to 100% of students saying like, at this school, every student has an opportunity to share their opinion about how to improve their learning experiences, right? And so there was other pieces in here about student voice, but I think also remembering like kind of how we got to this recommendation is important, and also trying to figure out like where to prioritize it, you know. And I think it again is probably something that we would multi-tier on how we would approach making sure that we hear more from students.
And I was just gonna say, what you said earlier resonated with me, Erin, about like we do have people graduating, like you know, and that, you know, what are they gonna see? Like they should at least have some nugget that they walk away with, wow, we did that. And, you know, because if we looked at the ones we've picked so far, they're a little bit more hefty. You know, writing a statement or reviewing all the, discipline, but if there was something that's targeted to that, I don't know which one of those, I don't know what it is, but if we,
I will say, not to toot our own horn, but at least the students I know have been very pleased with our successful implementation of the late bus, which was on the list. And so, you know, we're getting it done,
There
even
you
though
go.
we haven't.
Yeah.
everyone, like whoever, like that is like the win.
It's important not to overlook that either. Thanks for mentioning that, Chloe, because, you know, it's like, sometimes it seems like we're just going all the time, but like that little thing can make a significant difference, you know?
Yeah.
That's
Even
great.
like at Saga, what I'm the president of, like when the late bus happened, like our membership like average was like 20 students before, but then after the late bus started coming, it went up to 25. Like it really had an impact.
Yep.
Is someone monitoring that data?
Yes.
We have a little
Yeah.
log.
Yeah.
You mean the bus
Yeah.
data?
Oh, the bus. I thought you
Or-
said the club, sorry.
Bus and student attendance at clubs and stuff to prove that there's been a significant.
Yeah, we have all that.
Yeah. That's a good question. So I think so what I heard was that, you know, when thinking about, if one of the recommendations was that, you know, the school committee and the district should really think about tangible ways to have more student voice, and change, you know, and again, we would be able to look at how to do that. And that, you know, also thinking about, if we are gonna hear student voice, like, you have to do something with that voice, right? And so, you know, thinking about what would happen then when students start speaking, and like, what are things that if they say certain things, like, are we able to react and do things to make impact for especially those seniors that maybe, you know, will only be with us for a couple more months, or the first years that are gonna be with us or freshmen that are gonna be with us for a little bit longer. And so, that one, in my opinion, is a very vague recommendation, like from the committee, which is fine, and definitely needs some refinement about like what is success in that mode, and like what is, you know, whatnot. And I do think, going back to that metric that I said about that question, like that is something that we could do again, right? Is that you could try to implement something, do something, and then in June, send a survey out to students and ask just that one question and see like what percentage of students, how they replied, and then compare it to the original data and see if like you are able to make any impact on like if they actually felt the implementation of what we did.
I just wanted to mention that I forgot to say this when I was talking originally about the student voice, but I think that when I'm really hoping that when we get the application out for the subcommittee and the new members, I know that we had put in to have more student members than before, and I think just that in itself is a great step in the right direction for this. You know, it's just me, and like I you know, I try really hard to like, you know, think about what, you know, all different students might say, but like the more students, the more perspectives, and so I think that even just that would be a great improvement. So when we get to do that, yeah.
Do
Yeah,
any
and
other
one of the-
subcommittee, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do any other subcommittees have students on those committees? Like,
So one of the challenges we have, you know, even when we do interviews, and one of the things we're noticing is that that there are certain groups that end up not being on those, and we invite them, and they accept it sometimes, and then it just doesn't work out, and I don't mean this in a way where, you know, sometimes it's just the same kids show up, and it's the same representation. So we want it to be, we need some help with like, how can we make that happen? Where, and that's like a challenge.
Yeah.
Not for the lack of not trying, but for the lack of participation, and we wanna try to figure out some incentives or some ways we can get that. Like, is it transportation? What is it? It always seems to fall apart at the end.
Yeah, valid. To answer your question as well, so the subcommittee structures were not as defined as I would have expected them to be when upon arrival, and so that's why we're working through that process. I would love a world where at least every subcommittee for the school committee had a student representative on it, at least one, if not more than one. The school committee itself technically has 2 spots for students. We have one really active student that's phenomenal right now, that's coming to meetings, that gave me a big long list. Rob was there, we got a big long list yesterday of things that they're excited about and working on with their student union. And so, no, like, is the actual answer. Like, the building subcommittee, I do not believe has a student that sits on it right now. I am not 100% on the wellness committee. I do not believe there's a student, even though there is community members on it, like their parents and folks from the community, but I don't think there's a student. And then the third committee is the policy subcommittee, and there's not a student on that one either. So that would be a tangible thing as we're working through that other policy to consider. That would be, you know, something that could maybe have an impact. And then also, to Shivali's point, I'm big on thinking about, like, how do you go to the students instead of making the students come to you? And so sitting on a committee is a great opportunity for students, but also, like, can a committee or someone that's working on something go to the students at the schools and do a little like lunchtime chit chat thing, or to, you know, like, there's other ways to get information from student and to get student voice involved in decision making than making them come to a committee meeting every time. And also, I worry about our younger students too. Like, I think we focus a lot on, like, oh, let's get the high school students, and I know you all talked about middle school and high school, but also, like, I live with an elementary student that has a lot of opinions, like, about their education, and I probably redirect them back to their building principal all the time, so I'm sure they appreciate that. But, like, you know, like, I do think that all of our students in this district have opportunities and ideas of things. So, like, thinking about how do you get all student voice, not just the older student voice, when you're thinking about students' education.
I think it's also important to note that student voice can happen in a lot of different ways. You know, like committee involvement certainly is one. Involvement in groups and things like that is another. But, like, one of the things that jumps out at me is, going back to the data, Erin, that you kind of referenced. What's similar to the data you talked about, the equity audit, is our survey works data. So, like, for example, there was one metric that we looked at this summer with the admin team that showed something along the lines of only 27% of students in grades 6 through 12 responded favorably to a question about belonging in school. That's, like, one that, like, you know, when I'm moving through the data, I'm like, whoa, that's not good, you know? And it was like, it had been kind of on a downward trend the last few years. So that, to me, that begs the question of why, right? So if we can get at, because school belonging can mean a lot of different things, but that kind of begs the question for me as a standpoint to say, like, hey, can we dig into this a little bit more? Like, maybe we can kind of, like, survey our students on just that, and just say, like, hey, what would make you feel more belonging? What would make you feel like you were belonging more at school? You know, like, what's missing? You know, what's lacking? What's happening that is not making you feel this way? You know what I mean? I think that would be a place where we could give student voice, because to me, it's like trying to solve that problem without incorporating student voice is a fool's errand, and you need to bring the students into that. So that's just my 2 cents on it. You know, I think that there's. I'm just curious about what's causing them to think that way. You know, what's causing that number of students to respond in that way.
Other thoughts on this topic? If not, I'd want to kind of move us through. So what I've heard so far is, I heard, and this is very anecdotal heard, but, like, some excitement about the vision statement, but to be honest, I also heard some not excitement about the vision statement, and so we can maybe talk through that. But I think it's super valuable. But, like, again, this is about prioritizing. It's not saying we'll never do something. It's saying whatever. So vision statement is one of the things that's on the table as a possible recommendation for this year. Looking at the discipline policies and practices, that one seemed, in my opinion, to have some excitement about, like, hey, if we were able to make some moves here, and again, if I'm not feeling your feelings right, please correct me and, like, advocate for me to understand better of kind of what I'm seeing and hearing in this room. So I heard some pretty good thoughts about discipline and policy and practices, and then obviously we just heard some good conversations about prioritizing, you know, some strategy around more student voice. And it also, like, if you look through the report, you also see, like, where it talks about, like, not just, like, getting more information about students from students, but, like, what do you want to see? Like here, like, what they want in decisions that are being made. So like, you know, an example of that where we probably missed the mark was when we were talking about the late buses. Like a group of adults that have not been on a bus in a really long time, and even though we had administrator feedback on it, like pick the times and things for the buses based on what we were knowing. But I don't know if a student voice was involved in like, hey, what exact times was this work? You know, like, so like there's opportunities I think that we could work through that have actual impact, not just like philosophical, like both are important, but I think what the report was really getting at was the formalizing communication channels and protocols to allow students to actively provide input into school and district leaders, like in the hopes to impact like decisions that are being made. So I think that's an important piece, like as we work through it, is that giving them that agency to it, not just the voice, but like the impact and the power to have impact. So I heard a little bit of that, and so those are 3 that we've talked about thus far. And so what are other ones that, like, again, as a member of the DEI subcommittee, you're sitting here right now, and if we like, if the like the DEI subcommittee got like disappeared and we didn't like do anything else, you'd be like, oh man, we didn't get that one done, and that one was really important for the students in this district. And it could be one of these, it could be another one, like. Because Jen would like us to give 5. Like I got, when Jen calls me later, I gotta have a nice list for her, or I failed.
One that's not on here, and
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with a colleague today about, is diversifying our workforce. And making it more representative of our student population. And it is not very diverse at all.
Yep, that's a good thought. I think it's in the full report, right? Or is it?
So.
Yeah. I think also, and I have not been able to find this data, although it might exist. I don't even have the baseline data, I don't think, on that. Like, you know, we can make some assumptions and some, you know, thoughts, and we'd have to think about how we define diversity of a workforce. But also, without that data, that's a difficult decision to know that if we're even meeting if our staff is even equal to our student population. Like I don't personally know that data yet.
I don't know it officially,
Yeah.
but I could make a good.
We can make a good guess, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm not saying you're wrong by any means, but I'm saying that could be part of something
Yes.
like that. Is just creating a baseline of like, where are we? Because I don't know that answer.
I think it's a really
Yeah.
important point.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with Erin because the numbers are powerful. Like for
Yeah.
instance, when we look at our CTE enrollment, one of the things that we learned was while our population for certain demographics was really small, the participation of that percentage of students in the CTE program that represented that population was really was over 50%. So it was kind of like really good to see that because we would have never thought about it that way unless we looked at the numbers.
So, yeah, and so we could, if that was important to this committee, like there's a couple different things. Like one, like I think that could be like tackled like definitely in a different way. Like especially because this is like we want to take things from the equity audit and like make sure that we're working on those recommendations. But also, I think when you're thinking about equity vision statement, right? And like what do we want to say with the vision statement? Like I think part of that is creating an environment and creating like, you know, there's things there most certainly that could be woven in or considered too. And then also like with student voice and honestly disciplinary data, I would imagine like with student voice, like we all know that like all the data shows that like students say that like it helps in educational environments to have people who look like them, who have people that understand them, etc. Like that is very proven in data in educational research. And so that's something students have already told us and we already know. And so like, you know, working through like how we can improve that piece of it I think is essential. And then also with discipline, I can imagine that there's some pretty strong data there too about like the benefits of that. So I think that that's an interwoven one, and although I don't think explicitly called out in the report, although I'm gonna check. And it might not have been because like there wasn't data provided around it, you know, like, but like we could definitely put that one on a like additional things to consider list and bring it up to the school committee because we're already aware of it, and so, you know, but it might be nice to officially cull it out. Yeah, it's a really good thought. Other thoughts on that or other things?
Just what comes up for me, because I agree, and when we talk about the recruitment piece, I'm always like, but are you gonna keep them? So the retention piece is really important, and I think I agree with the interwovenness, because if we're ultimately seeking to change a culture, that will come, but it comes with time. So it's one of those that's like not the quick win right now, but we still need to work. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to talk about recruitment without retention.
Mm-hmm. Noted. Yeah, I would add too, and this is like, that issue I think too is multi-level, and honestly, something that I think about is like a local official, like a local elected official, about like what can the state be doing to go one step further than, like you need to have people to recruit, right? And what are we doing, you know, to try to help that pipeline of educators, to be able to even have people eligible to hire, right? And so, most certainly a super important thing, but to Melissa's point too, like that's not, there's some quick things you could probably do, very intentional, right? Change, I've seen it done at our workplace, changes in HR practices, hiring practices, ways you advertise, where you advertise, there's some very tangible, fast things you can do, and then also maybe some long-term things, but I do agree that the retention piece is key in that. So if the committee felt that they would like to bring that to the attention of the school committee, like I would add it as like a PS, like the report, that wasn't a recommendation in the report, but also please consider kind of vibe. So you all can consider that. Other things that jump out on this list of your top 5. So like if Rob deleted it right now. So right, so we have a couple that we didn't, right? No, but like, yeah.
Deleting it, just so you know.
You've met me, like come on. Like no, but like you've got to think about, like that's kind of like where like we're at, right? So like these are up here, right? So we've talked about increasing student voice, right? So maybe that one's gonna go to the school committee. We've talked about equity statement, maybe that will go. We've talked about discipline data, that one's probably gonna go. Create an equity communication plan to develop key messages to share to the vision for equity, both internally and externally. I'm gonna have Rob delete that right now. Everybody cool with that? Anybody wanna fight for it?
Well, it's highlighted twice, so I
Yeah.
feel we should at least talk.
I know, I was joking. I was just like trying to get you like, you look tired, so I was trying to untire you a little, like get you excited again. Like, I was trying to tap into something. Yeah, let's talk about it. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just gonna say on
You wanna
create a logic model of the professional learning goals.
Yep.
That one's there because some of the reasons that they're in the bottom were like they were resource heavy. It didn't mean that they weren't prioritized, from what I recall. But the only thing that comes to mind is we talk so much, and I know Rob, you were talking about the consulting and getting that is that part, would that fit into that? Is that something do you feel like that's gonna be tackled with that initiative? Or
I'm gonna be brutally honest here. Like when it comes to the phrase "create a logic model for professional learning" is like I'd be curious about what they mean by that.
Yeah, so what they said was, create a logic model for your professional learning goals focused on equity. And so it says, through the creation of logic models or similar template focused on each equity goal, there is a roadmap to not only provide an overview of ongoing professional learning, but also expected outcomes both short and long term. A logic model also provides a vision that can be communicated to all stakeholders. And so it seems like it was focused on...
Did it provide this template?
Feels like a lot of words.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest.
It's
I think it's a lot of words, but it might
Yeah.
mean the gist of it might be
Yeah, I think
something
I
that
think
will-
what they're getting at, give me one sec.
Yeah.
I think that what they're getting at with that one is don't just do the one-off professional learning
Right.
that, like, you bring in the speaker, okay, cool, we brought in the diversity
Right.
speaker. Like, it seems like they're getting at this concept of using data and, creating an ongoing, model or template of what are our goals and how are we providing professional learning to try to help us achieve that goal. So if we picked a goal of hey, we really want to help our staff and faculty try to work on their own implicit bias, like that is one of the things that would be in that, and then we'd go from there. Like that is my interpretation of it, but I do agree that how it's written, it's pretty like wonky. But some of y'all voted for it, for sure, as
Well,
far
it's
as
a bottom
like,
five.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's bottom 5, but to your point, like it might have been bottom 5 because that seems really, really hard or seems really, really expensive. Like, like your matrix wasn't, is this valuable or is this not? As we're trying to cull this list and figure out what way to go early, like are we,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
we just gotta remember too that there's 38 total
Yeah.
things. We're just looking at the top and bottom 5 here,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's all the extra,
Yeah.
the other ones too.
Yeah,
I
my
think-
recommendation would be to stay in the top half right now, unless you want to divert from that, because your top half is more than 5.
Mhm.
And so those were the ones that you all felt at some point that like had high impact and also might be realistic with resources. So, it's not that you have to, but like kind of the work you've done thus far, I would stay line 7 up at this point, but it's totally, you all are the committee. I'm not voting today. I talked to Jen about, no, Jen and I were talking about how like, even though I think it's very valuable to have school committee members on a subcommittee, like you get to double vote basically, and I don't think that's appropriate. And so I told Jen a couple weeks ago I was gonna abstain from all DEI votes. Like I'm happy to be part of the conversation and stuff, I think that's important, but like this is really like for you all to decide like, hey, school committee, this is what I think you need to be thinking about and prioritizing. Well, there's 9 other million priorities. Like that's the other thing to think about. There's so many things happening in the district right now that like these are your 5 that you want us to look at that's getting added to a list of like 100 other things that we've got to do by June. And like these need to be ones that you're like so excited about that like you want us to put down something else really important and pick this up because that's like how important it is to you right now.
So I'm gonna jump on
Yeah.
that, okay? Cause to me, it's just me, we have enough already, I think. If we're talking about 1 year of work that we're gonna be focused on, I think if we're looking at discipline data and we wanna make it impactful, we just wanna do it and check the box. If we wanna make it actually impactful and meaningful work, it's gonna take time, and it's gonna take people, and people don't have a lot of time. So my feeling is like, if we're gonna be looking at data, policies and practice through an equity lens, that's heavy work. That's important work. And I think that there's gonna be a lot of, there's gonna be a lot of pulls on people to get that work done in the right way. If we're gonna look at it, providing opportunities for increasing student voice, again, there's real effort that goes into that work, And then the third piece is the equity vision statement. And the equity vision statement, I think is really important, but we don't want it to be a statement that ends up doing more harm than good. And if we don't follow the right process for doing it, I think it can actually go that way. So I think, this is just me, I think those 3 are more than enough.
Valid. Other thoughts on that?
When we, like, are we just saying, here's what we recommend and these are the words that we're using, or are we also like, here's a potential plan for that to happen? Cause my head's going to who's doing all of this, and if it, like, yes, it's a lot, and if it's spread out, can we add more to the list if the work is spread out?
Yeah.
So that's my question is, who is doing the work and who tells the people who are doing the work that they have to do it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that's one of the reasons why, when the school committee was having conversations about adding, additional folks into the district that could help with this, like that was something that I was feeling very strongly, is that I was looking at these amazing hardworking professionals in this district who were just coming out of a pandemic, trying to help students with learning loss, trying to like work through huge administrative changes, et cetera. And then I was looking at this list of 38 things being like, oh my God, like this is, like I can't ask any of these nice humans to do this work, even if they think it's really important right now. And so, not that one position and that position's not even fully funded for like long, like it's a very like short-term thing. And so I think to that point, like different people will do different work, but like I would attest that most of the people in this district are maxed out right now. And so, but also this is really important work. And so figuring out how to weave it into things we're already doing, how to maximize things, how to do it efficiently and effectively, like, I think is really an important piece of it. And I think that is, in my opinion, the school committee working with the administration, but really the administration's job of thinking about, okay, the DEI subcommittee made recommendations to school committee, the school committee is making recommendations that we need to prioritize that, and then that's really administrative at that point. Like, they really get to work through what that looks like with all the other things that they're doing for students. Is that?
Yeah,
right?
it is.
And so, but with that said, like, you could add more things, but if you look like at your list, because I do agree with Rob, that each thing that you're proposing is, there's probably like, you could have like 15 things to do more student voice, right? Like, it's not one thing, it's a strategy of how do we do this, right? And like, where do we want to make this impact? And also, how do we weave it into everything, right? And you all gave some really good examples of like things that we're already doing that we could magnify, right? So like, okay, we need to add students to, or offer to add students to all the subcommittees. Oh, they can't make it because it's at night and they have cooler things to do than hang out in a room like this. Okay, well then those committees need to go and go during the school day and hear from students. You know, like, those are things that are already happening so that we can think about how to do it. But like, if you look at your top 5, the only one that wouldn't get put forward, because 4 and 6 are friends, is number 5, but 5 is really like a step after you finish your equity vision, right? Like, you're not gonna do 5 until that's done. So like, I wouldn't prioritize that right now because it's just gonna sit on my list up in La La Land for a while until we get that done. And so out of your top 5, like, in theory, you're putting forward all of those. Hey, bud.
Hi.
Hey,
Hey there.
have a seat, buddy. We're gonna be wrapping up soon.
Don't worry, we're almost
Okay?
done. We gotta get to
Yeah.
7. And so thoughts on, so what would happen, I think, as far as next steps, Melissa, to kind of like, to explain the process, is I think kind of where we're at in the school year and whatnot, and again, with, you heard about like how we get on things on agendas and things, like, if you all made the recommendations of like kind of number 2, number 3, and then 4 and 5 combined, right? Then that would go to the school committee, but like not until November, in theory, right? I think our next meeting is in November because of holidays and elections and things. And then in November, we would like talk about it, and then either it would get deferred, like voted on and deferred to the administration, or it would get like voted on and sent back here for further details, right? Like, we might say, hey, like, we thought that idea of student voice was really great, but we'd love the DEI subcommittee to give us a list of some things that they think would have impact, right? Or whatever. Or so it could go like a couple different directions, or like maybe the disciplinary policy one would get deferred to the policy committee, right? And so at this point, like, all I think you need to really think about is, what do we want to move up to the school committee so that they can take action and to move somewhere, kind of vibe. Does that make sense?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. So what are we thinking? And again, like, I don't wanna, this is, you all exist for a reason. Like, I could do stuff up at the school committee level that I don't, like, but like, we really want you all to feel like, yeah, okay, we've got these things, like, the school committee is gonna hear it, hopefully we'll get some action, hopefully we'll get to hear that students got on a bus and got to stay for really important organizations, you know, like, oh wow, we got a position posted that we've never had, like, you know, that's interesting, we got to make some impact, right? And so, like, are you all feeling like the things up there, and again, it doesn't mean that we won't get to them, it doesn't mean that they won't get woven in, it doesn't mean that they're actually not gonna get started right now, it just means that at this next school committee meeting, like, Jen will read those 3 things, and then the school committee will talk about how to accept your recommendations and what the next steps would be, basically.
And Erin, we're putting them out just as the 3, or are they prioritized?
Up to you. And it doesn't just have to be the 3, that was Rob's thought, but if you all said, nope, I also want this one, or I also want this one, but you also only have 5 minutes left, so. No worries, and we could also table it, and if you all don't feel ready, you could table it to your next meeting, it doesn't have to go today.
I understand the formal process that
Yeah.
the school committee has to go through, and all of those steps, and the 2 readings and all of that, has
That's only
to
for
happen.
policy.
Oh, for policies, okay. So I understand all of that somewhat, I guess. But can it be made known informally that these are things that the DEI is talking about? Could the superintendent maybe, when this is discussed at school committee meetings, could he then go to the administrator, is it admin council? Go to admin council and say, oh, this came up. And then that's easy for the the principals to say, oh, the superintendent was talking about increasing student voice and listening. So teachers at the faculty meeting, they could hear from their principal, student voice is coming up as something that's very important. Listen to your students, see what are they saying? And then it can kind of flow down that way and then maybe back up. Because even in our PLTs that we have in the morning, kids are saying, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. And that's
Sorry,
informal.
what's it?
Personal learning.
Thank you.
It's an
Yeah, I got it.
SL and PLT. And the conversations are happening and
Yep.
it flows up easily and down easily. So just that informal aspect
Yeah.
as a side road to the formality.
It's such a good point. Something that I think is super important is that every administrator in this district has this report, right? 95 pages, they can read all of it. I also wrote them like a nice summary of it, that's on there too, right? We went through and tried to make shorter. What we're talking about right now is like asking the school committee to prioritize time, resources, and like it's almost, for lack of a better word, like the mandate, right? Like the school committee could say like, hey, like we would like to do this, or hey, we'd like to allocate this money, or hey, we'd like to change this policy, because those are the areas that we have. The administration and the building leaders and the teachers, like it doesn't mean that they can't do things right now that can make impact on things in this report. Like I would hope that people are, and it sounds like those conversations are happening, and hey, what can we change to make this better? Or hey, did you see in that report this? Like, let's talk about that. Or hey, we're hiring this position, like, and we know that we wanna have a more diverse workforce. What can we do to try to, like, work to do that, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, this is like the, like, bigger things, like as far as like, okay, school committee, like we want you to prioritize this, like let's like focus on it kind of vibe. So all of that can happen simultaneously, if that makes sense.
But yeah, making it conscious.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
is important.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
think like, for example, like Rob or I or Shivali like leave this room and then like these aren't like in our brains in the next meeting we go to, like it's not for me at least, you know, like, and so, but I hear you, and we can also connect with Dr. Duva regarding it as well.
Yep, the piece that the school committee can really help with.
Yeah.
As we move forward is the money for the consult.
Yeah.
Which I think can really be critical to moving this work forward.
Yeah.
You know, when we're talking about professional learning, when we're talking about crafting an equity vision statement, those were all things that were put into the RFP, that were put in as like specific things that we wanted to make sure we focused on. That was based on this. So I think that can really help, I think, moving the work forward. And also I think obviously the position and getting filled can also help too. You know what I mean? If we're able to find that, but I think that can help really bring this work together, because I do think that this is all really important work, and we administratively can certainly handle it, but we don't want this to be just a top-down thing that just comes from us, because that's not gonna go anywhere. This has to be something that people own, and that there's the right process that we go through to get voices, stakeholder buy-in and all that stuff, so.
Yeah, because again, like, and the structure of K-12 education is interesting, and we're not gonna get into that because we've got football, like, now. And this meeting officially ends at 7. But, the school committee, and as a subcommittee of the school committee's area of influence is really, obviously selecting, like, the superintendent, like, that piece of it, is one of their responsibilities, but also, like, the budget and the policies. Like, that's really kind of where our scope ends. But what you all are talking about, like, does, like, kind of fit into that. And it's also about the vision, sorry. That's another piece that the school committee, like, works through, is, like, what is our vision, blah, blah. So, like, the things that you all are talking about, like, where the school committee would then, like, jump on it is, like, what policies do we need to change about discipline? Like, what resources, like, budget do we need to put towards that, or for the other one about student voice, okay, like, what opportunities does the school committee have for student voice? Like, what, and it doesn't mean that the administration won't do student voice too, but, like, it's really, I think, remembering, like, we're trying to impact the areas that the school committee works through, which are really that policy budget kind of concept. And so, I think your recommendations, like, work well with that, and so, like, that's where, like, we could start with that piece of it, and then you could go from there. With that said, it's 7:01, but, go ahead, Melissa.
I was just gonna kind of,
Or if
like,
you need to go to.
is this,
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
we're talking about the increased opportunities for student voice in areas valued by students, create a NK equity vision statement, and then like the monitor discipline data, review and revise policies, and there is that solicit student input about the current disciplinary system. So I'm seeing like
Disciplinary, yeah,
Right.
yeah, I'm seeing that as a package.
potentially move this forward.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. Is that?
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion to, what I just said? Moving those, to recommend, thank you, those 3 topics
Increase
to the
student
school.
I'll second that.
Okay, so so we have a motion and a second, so the motion is to recommend, the 3 topics, which are to, increase opportunities for student voice, to create an NKSD equity vision statement, and to address, the monitoring of disciplinary data, solicit student input about current disciplinary system, and, review and revise disciplinary policies and practices from an equity lens. So that is a motion on the table. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on your recommendation?
I think it's great because we're actually having more than 3, but like we're packaging them together, so it's like even though it's only 3, it's like more. So I'm very pleased.
Anything else? Any other discussion on the motion on the table? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. It's my favorite thing to say, I don't know why. All those in favor of approving this motion and sending those recommendations up to the school committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed, any abstention? Motion carries unanimously, so that is great. And then the last thing on the agenda was, we're not getting to it, so don't get excited. The things that we will not be able to get to today, but I'll talk to Jen about future things, was the core values, like reviewing the NKHS core values with an equity lens and making recommendations, and then also reviewing and discussing suggestions for district documents with possible actions. That was like trying to update things, etc. And so I will talk to Jen about that for a future one, and your next meeting is November 15th at 5:30. And can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Okay, do I have a second? Thank you so much. Be the writer downer. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great, sorry about 7:04. Can you just hit the off button, please, and the microphone too?
Yes. Oh, goodness.
Are you ready, Luke?
Good luck.